At my birthday party, my wife arrogantly announced to everyone, "Just so you all know, we're in an open relationship now." I calmly replied, "As you wish." Then I immediately turned to her attractive single best friend and asked her out for the weekend. Her friend smiled and said, "I can do everything better than her." My wife completely froze, her confident smile turning to pure shock. Look, I'm not saying I saw it coming. But when your wife spends 3 months talking about exploring new dimensions of our relationship and breaking free from societal constructs, you start to wonder if she's been binge-watching too much reality TV or if she's actually lost her damn mind. Turns out, it was a little bit of both, and she decided to share her enlightenment with the entire neighborhood on my 35th birthday. Because nothing says happy birthday like public humiliation served with a side of barbecued chicken wings. Cal and Denise had really outdone themselves this year. String lights crisscrossed their backyard like some kind of suburban constellation. The grill was pumping out enough smoke to summon a small fire department. And someone had set up a Bluetooth speaker that was currently murdering a perfectly good Stevie Wonder song with its tinny bass. There were probably 20, maybe 25 people milling around. Coworkers, neighbors, that one guy from my gym who I'd never actually spoken to, but who showed up to every party within a 5-mile radius like some kind of social scavenger. Everyone was doing that thing adults do at parties where they pretend their lives are going great while secretly calculating how early they can leave without seeming rude. I was posted up near the snack table, which I claimed as my emotional support station about an hour into the festivities. My beer was getting warm in my hand, but I was nursing it like it was the last life preserver on the Titanic. Denise had made these little bacon-wrapped jalapeno things that were absolutely lethal, and I'd already burned my mouth twice, but pain was better than making small talk with Brad from accounting about his new lawnmower. The guy had literally cornered me for 15 minutes explaining the benefits of mulching blades versus bagging blades, and I'd seriously considered faking a medical emergency just to escape. Monica had been acting weird all night. Well, weirder than usual. She kept glancing at me with this expression that I can only describe as a mix between a cat about to knock something expensive off a shelf and a game show host about to reveal what's behind door number 3. She'd been drinking white wine at a pace that suggested she was either really nervous or training for some kind of Olympic chugging event. Her best friend Sabrina had arrived fashionably late, as usual, wearing this black dress that probably cost more than my car payment and looking like she'd just stepped off a magazine cover. Monica had practically tackled her at the door, and they'd been huddled in the corner doing that intense whisper-giggling thing that women do when they're either planning something diabolical or talking about someone's questionable life choices. I should have known something was up when Monica kept checking her phone and fixing her hair. She only does that when she's about to do something monumentally stupid and wants to make sure she looks good while doing it. But I was too busy trying to avoid eye contact with my boss, who'd shown up uninvited and was currently explaining his fantasy football strategy to anyone unfortunate enough to be within earshot. Then it happened. Monica climbed up on one of Cal's dining room chairs, a wooden one that probably wasn't rated for this level of drama. And I watched in slow-motion horror as she wobbled slightly, steadied herself by grabbing Denise's shoulder, and then raised her wine glass like she was about to give the State of the Union address. The music didn't stop immediately, so she had to shout, "Everyone," twice before someone finally had the sense to turn down the speaker. The sudden silence was deafening. You know that moment in movies where everything goes quiet and you can hear the protagonist's heartbeat? Yeah, it was exactly like that, except my heartbeat was accompanied by the sound of my dignity preparing to evacuate the premises. "I just want everyone to know," Monica announced, her voice carrying across the yard with the confidence of someone who definitely had one too many glasses of Chardonnay, "that Julian and I are in an open relationship now." I'm not exaggerating when I say that the entire party froze. Brad stopped mid-sentence about his stupid lawnmower. My boss's beer can paused halfway to his lips. Denise looked like someone had just told her that her house was on fire and her insurance had lapsed. Cal, God bless him, let out a quiet, "Oh shit," that perfectly summarized the collective sentiment of everyone present. 20-some faces swiveled toward me in perfect synchronization, like I was suddenly the most interesting thing that had ever happened in this subdivision, which, to be fair, I probably was at that exact moment. Monica was standing there on that chair, smirking down at me with this expression of pure triumph. like she'd just won some kind of twisted game I didn't even know we were playing. She was waiting, practically vibrating with anticipation, for me to turn red, to stammer, to maybe start crying or begging or doing whatever the hell she'd fantasized I would do when she dropped this particular bombshell. I could see it in her eyes. She wanted me to crumble, to make a scene, to prove to everyone that she still had control over me like I was some kind of emotional puppet and she was pulling all the strings. But here's the thing about being pushed to your absolute limit. Eventually, something breaks, and it's either going to be you or the illusion you've been living under. I chose the illusion. I took a long, slow sip of my warm beer, feeling every single pair of eyes boring into me. Then I smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, calm one, and said in the most casual voice I could muster, "As you wish." The confusion on Monica's face was absolutely priceless. That wasn't the reaction she'd been expecting. Not even close. But I wasn't done. I turned to Sabrina, who was standing near the patio door looking absolutely stunning and slightly amused by the whole train wreck unfolding before her. Our eyes met, and I saw something flicker there. Surprise, maybe, or respect, or possibly just the realization that she was about to become part of whatever insane plot twist this night had become. "Sabrina," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, keeping my voice steady and conversational like I was asking her about the weather, "you free this weekend? I'd love to take you out." The silence that followed was somehow even more profound than the first one. I swear I could hear someone's jaw literally drop. Cal whispered something that sounded like, "Oh my God," mixed with a laugh. Brad from accounting looked like he'd just witnessed a miracle. My boss actually smiled for the first time in the 3 years I'd worked for him. Sabrina didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, that dangerous smile spreading across her face like wildfire, and said in a voice dripping with confidence, "Of course. I can do everything better than her anyway." Someone dropped a plate. It shattered on the concrete patio with a crash that seemed to punctuate the moment perfectly. The guy from my gym actually started clapping before someone elbowed him to stop. Cal was gripping Denise's arm so hard I thought he might leave a bruise, both of them staring at the scene like they were watching the season finale of their favorite show. I looked back at Monica, still standing on that chair, and watched in real time as her smug expression collapsed faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The wine glass in her hand started trembling. For the first time in what felt like 7 years of marriage, I think my wife forgot how to breathe, how to speak, how to do anything except stand there and realize that she'd just made the biggest tactical error of her life. And for the first time in 7 years, I felt absolutely, gloriously free. The party didn't exactly recover after that little nuclear detonation. People started making those polite excuses that everyone knows are bullshit. Early mornings, babysitter issues, sudden migraines that definitely had nothing to do with the social apocalypse they'd just witnessed. Cal tried to restart the music, but it felt like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. Within 15 minutes, the backyard had cleared out faster than a movie theater after someone yells fire, and I was left standing there with my warm beer, watching Monica climb down from her throne of poor decisions with all the grace of a newborn giraffe. She didn't look at me, not directly. Instead, she made a big show of thanking Denise for the lovely party and complimenting the decorations like she hadn't just detonated a social grenade in the middle of the potato salad. Sabrina had already left, smart woman, after giving me a quick wink and mouthing, "Text me," when Monica wasn't looking. Cal walked me to the door and clapped me on the shoulder with the kind of firm grip that men use when words would just complicate things. "That was legendary, bro," he whispered. "Absolutely legendary." Coming from a guy who once tried to deep fry a turkey in his garage and nearly burned down his house, that was high praise indeed. Monica was already at the car, standing by the passenger door with her arms crossed, and that expression on her face that I'd come to recognize over 7 years of marriage. The one that said she was gearing up for a fight and had already rehearsed her opening arguments in the bathroom mirror. Her heels were clicking against the driveway like little gunshots, tap, 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 a staccato rhythm of barely contained rage. The string lights from Cal's yard cast weird shadows across her face, making her look like a character from one of those film noir movies where everyone's got an angle and nobody's telling the truth. I unlocked the car, but she didn't get in. Of course she didn't. That would have been too easy, too civil, Too much like acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, she'd screwed up royally and we could deal with it like adults when we got home. No, Monica needed an audience. Even if that audience was just the neighbors' houses with their windows glowing in the darkness, and probably half of them peeking through their curtains to see if the entertainment was going to continue. "Get in the car, Monica," I said, keeping my voice level and calm, which I knew would irritate her even more than yelling. She hated when I was calm. It meant she couldn't paint me as the irrational one, couldn't play the victim card she kept in her back pocket for emergencies. "No," she said, like a toddler refusing to leave the playground. "We're talking about this right now." I leaned against the driver's door and crossed my arms, mirroring her posture. "Okay, talk." She stepped closer, her heels clicking again, and I could smell the wine on her breath mixed with her perfume. Something expensive that she'd bought last month after watching some influencer video about signature scents and personal branding. Everything with Monica was about presentation, about how things looked from the outside, like our entire marriage was just a really elaborate Instagram post, and she was constantly adjusting the filter. "What the hell was that?" she hissed, her voice low and sharp like a knife, trying to stay quiet. "What the hell was that back there?" I shrugged, going for casual even though my heart was pounding like I'd just run a marathon. "What you announced, apparently. An open relationship. I'm just taking your lead, sweetheart. Following your vision for our future together." Her eyes narrowed, and I could practically see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out how to spin this, how to rewrite the narrative, so she came out looking like the reasonable one. "You know I didn't mean it like that," she said, and there it was, the backpedal, the revision, the classic Monica move of saying something insane and then acting shocked when people took her at her word. "Really?" I said, pushing off from the car and taking a step toward her. Not aggressive, just closing the distance enough that she couldn't pretend we were having two different conversations. Because the crowd looked pretty convinced. Brad from accounting looked like he'd just witnessed the second coming. My boss actually smiled for the first time since the fiscal quarter started. Cal whispered, "Oh damn," so loud I'm pretty sure the people on the next street heard it. "So either you're a really convincing liar, or you meant every word." She started pacing back and forth across the driveway like one of those malfunctioning robot vacuums that keeps bumping into the same wall over and over again. Her heels were going to leave marks in Cal's asphalt, but I figured that was the least of anyone's concerns at this point. "It was a joke, Julian. A joke. I was trying to be funny, to lighten the mood. By announcing our private business to 25 people? That's your idea of comedy?" Because let me tell you, it killed. Absolutely murdered. The room was dead silent. "So if that was your goal, congratulations, you nailed it." She whipped around to face me, and I could see the desperation starting to creep into her expression, the realization that her plan, whatever insane plan she'd cooked up with Sabrina or in her own head, had backfired spectacularly. "You're being ridiculous. You know you're being ridiculous, right? Asking out my best friend in front of everyone. That was cruel. That was deliberately cruel." I laughed. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of her calling me cruel after what she'd just pulled was so rich, so perfectly Monica, that all I could do was laugh. "You've been talking about open relationships for months," I said, once I'd gotten control of myself. "Months, Monica. What if we explored other connections? Don't you think monogamy is just a social construct? We should be free to experience life fully." I've heard every variation of that speech while you're scrolling through your phone at midnight, reading articles about polyamory and ethical non-monogamy like they're the holy scriptures. So congratulations, you got what you wanted. You got your open relationship. Effective immediately. Consider this the grand opening. Her face went through about 6 different expressions in the span of 3 seconds. Shock, anger, confusion, horror, and finally landing on something that looked almost like fear. "You're not serious." "Oh, I'm dead serious. More serious than I've been about anything in years. You made the announcement. You set the terms. I'm just playing by the rules you established. That's how this works, right? Open means open. For both of us." She blinked at me like I'd just started speaking Mandarin, her perfectly made-up eyes going wide. But I didn't. I wasn't. You can't just. Can't just what? Accept the relationship parameters you publicly announced? Take you at your word? Treat you like an adult who means what she says? Which part am I not allowed to do exactly? A car drove past, slowing down slightly, and I could see the silhouette of someone's head turning to look at us. Great. Tomorrow the whole neighborhood would be talking about the Ross family drama. Monica noticed too and lowered her voice even more. This isn't what I wanted. Then what did you want? I asked, genuinely curious now. What was the goal here? Humiliate me? Test me? See if I'd roll over and take it like I've taken everything else for the past 7 years? Sorry to disappoint, but I'm fresh out of tolerance for your bullshit. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. For once in her life, Monica was actually speechless, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd seen all night. Even better than Sabrina's smile, even better than Cal's shocked expression, even better than the look on my boss's face when he realized he'd witnessed the best entertainment his boring suburban life had seen in years. I'm going home, I said, unlocking the car with a beep that sounded way too cheerful for the moment. You can come with me, or you can walk. Either way, this conversation is over. I got in the car, started the engine, and waited. She stood there for another 30 seconds, probably hoping I'd cave, hoping I'd apologize, hoping this was all some elaborate bluff that she could call. But when I put the car in reverse, she finally scrambled to the passenger side and got in, slamming the door hard enough to make the whole car shake. We drove home in complete silence, the kind of thick, suffocating silence that feels like it has weight and substance. I turned on the radio just to have something other than the sound of her breathing. And of course it was playing some sappy love song about forever and always and never letting go. I changed the station to sports talk. Much better. When we pulled into our driveway, she finally spoke. You embarrassed me. I turned off the engine and looked at her, really looked at her, and I couldn't believe I'd spent 7 years with someone who could say something that delusional with a straight face. I embarrassed you? Sweetheart, you stood up at my birthday party and declared to everyone we know that you're open for business. I just accepted your business plan. If you're embarrassed, maybe next time think before you speak. I got out of the car and headed inside, leaving her sitting there in the darkness. Cal sent me a text before I even made it to the bedroom. Dude, that was the most badass thing I've ever seen. I smiled, plugged in my phone, and went to bed. For the first time in years, I slept like a baby. I woke up to the sound of the front door slamming at what my phone informed me was 3:47 in the morning, which meant Monica had been out doing God knows what for the past 6 hours. Part of me, the part that had been trained through 7 years of marriage to worry and wonder and wait up, wanted to get out of bed and check on her. The other part, the newer part that had apparently grown a spine sometime between the snack table and Sabrina's smile, rolled over and went back to sleep. That part won. When I finally dragged myself out of bed around 7:30, I found Monica passed out on the living room couch, still wearing her party dress, her makeup smeared across her face like a raccoon who'd gone 12 rounds with a bottle of wine and lost spectacularly. One of her heels was on the coffee table, the other was inexplicably in the kitchen doorway, and there was a half-eaten bag of chips spilled across the carpet like some kind of sad, crunchy crime scene. The whole picture screamed poor life choices, which seemed to be Monica's brand lately. I stepped over the chips, made myself some coffee, the good stuff I kept hidden in the back of the cabinet because Monica always complained it was too strong, and settled in at the kitchen table with my laptop to check my email. The coffee was perfect, dark and bitter, exactly how I liked it and exactly how Monica hated it, which somehow made it taste even better this morning. I was halfway through reading a passive-aggressive email from Brad about quarterly reports when I heard movement from the living room, followed by a groan that sounded like a wounded animal trying to. Remember, Wyatt had decided to play dead. Monica stumbled into the kitchen looking like death warmed over, reheated, and then left out in the sun for a week. Her hair was sticking up in about 17 different directions. Her mascara had migrated to her cheekbones, and she was squinting at me like I was the sun, and she was a vampire who'd forgotten to check the weather forecast before going outside. Coffee, she croaked, reaching for my mug with the desperation of someone who'd just crossed a desert. I pulled it away before she could grab it. Make your own. She stared at me like I'd just suggested she solve a complex mathematical equation using only interpretive dance. Are you serious right now? Dead serious. There's a coffee maker right there. You know how to use it. I've seen you do it before. Several times, actually. You're a grown woman with opposable thumbs. I have faith in you. She stood there swaying slightly, trying to decide if she had the energy to argue or if she should just make her own damn coffee. Self-preservation won out. and she shuffled over to the coffee maker like a zombie in designer pajamas. Well, a designer dress from last night that now looked like it had been through a wood chipper. I watched her fumble with the coffee grounds, spilling half of them on the counter, and felt absolutely zero obligation to help. "Where were you until 4 in the morning?" I asked, taking another sip of my coffee. "Delicious." She didn't turn around. "Out." "Out where?" "Just out. With Sabrina." I laughed. Couldn't help it. "Sabrina? Really? That's the lie you're going with?" "Because Sabrina texted me at 11 saying she was home watching Netflix and thanks for the entertainment at the party. So unless she's developed the ability to be in two places at once, you're going to need a better story." Monica's shoulders tensed up, and she still didn't turn around, just kept focusing on the coffee maker like it was the most fascinating piece of machinery she'd ever encountered. "Fine. I was at a bar. Alone. Happy. Ecstatic. Did you meet anyone interesting? Have any deep conversations about the nature of open relationships? Maybe hand out some business cards." She finally whipped around, and I could see her hangover had not improved her mood one bit. "You embarrassed me," she shouted, then immediately winced and grabbed her head. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone we know." I set down my coffee mug very carefully and looked at her with the kind of calm that I knew would drive her absolutely insane. "I embarrassed you? Sweetheart, you stood up at my birthday party, which you supposedly helped plan, and declared to everyone we know that you're open for business. I just accepted your business plan. If anything, I was being supportive. Isn't that what a good husband does? Support his wife's decisions." She didn't appreciate the sarcasm. I could tell because her face went through this whole journey of expressions: anger, frustration, confusion, and finally landing on something that looked like she was trying to calculate if murder would be worth the prison sentence. "You know that's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" I asked, genuinely curious at this point. "Help me understand." Because from where I was standing, which was next to the snack table holding a beer and minding my own business, you seemed pretty clear. You used your outside voice. You made eye contact with the crowd. You waited for the music to stop. That's not the behavior of someone making an offhand joke. That's the behavior of someone making an announcement. She grabbed her coffee, which she'd somehow managed to make despite her obvious hangover and coordination issues, and took a long drink, probably buying time to think of something to say that would make this my fault somehow. It was her favorite magic trick, turning her mistakes into my problems. "I was trying to spice things up," she said finally, "to make the party more interesting, to give people something to talk about. Mission accomplished. I guarantee you everyone at that party is talking about us right now. Cal's probably already told half the neighborhood. Brad from accounting has definitely updated his group chat. My boss is probably wondering if he should add this to my performance review." Julian handled public humiliation with remarkable composure. "So congratulations, you succeeded wildly." Her eyes started filling with tears, and I recognized the move immediately. The waterworks, the vulnerability play, the classic Monica technique for when logic and reason weren't working in her favor. It was Oscar-worthy, really. She should have gone into acting instead of real estate. "How can you be so cold?" she asked, her voice breaking in all the right places. "I made a mistake, okay? I had too much wine, I said something stupid, and now you're acting like I committed some kind of terrible crime. Can't you just forgive me and move on?" I stood up, took my coffee mug to the sink, and rinsed it out while I considered my response. Behind me, I could hear her sniffling dramatically, probably hoping I'd turn around and cave, apologize, take it all back, and pretend last night never happened. But something had shifted in me last night, something fundamental and irreversible, like a bone that had been broken so many times it finally just refused to heal the wrong way anymore. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said, still facing the sink. "I would have forgiven almost anything else. If you'd gotten drunk and told everyone I snore. If you'd shared some embarrassing story about me from college. If you'd made fun of my dad jokes, or my terrible dancing, or that time I accidentally locked myself out of the house wearing only a towel. I would have laughed it off, because that's what you do when you love someone. You laugh at their expense sometimes, and they laugh at yours, and everyone moves on." I turned around to face her. "But you didn't do any of that. You announced, publicly, deliberately, that our marriage was open. That's not a joke. That's not spicing things up. That's either a genuine desire to change the fundamental terms of our relationship, or it's a calculated attempt to humiliate me and assert dominance. Either way, It's not something I can just forgive and forget. She was full-on crying now, mascara running down her face in black rivers, looking like a sad Gothic painting. So what are you saying? You want a divorce? I'm saying I told you point blank yesterday. You made the rules, now you live by them. We have an open relationship now. Effective immediately. Those are your terms, and I accept them completely. But I don't want. Too late. The genie's out of the bottle, Monica. You can't just stuff it back in because you don't like what you wished for. She stood there crying, and I felt something, but it wasn't guilt or sympathy or the desire to fix things. It was more like watching a stranger have a breakdown in a grocery store. Vaguely uncomfortable, but not my responsibility. I grabbed my keys and my wallet from the counter. Where are you going? She asked, panic creeping into her voice. Work. Some of us have jobs that require us to show up on time and sober. It's Sunday. I have reports to catch up on. I'll be home when I'm home. I left her standing there in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face, and I didn't look back. My phone buzzed before I even made it to the car. Sabrina, she had that coming. Saturday at 7. Don't be late. I smiled, actually smiled. For what felt like the first time in years that wasn't forced or fake or for someone else's benefit. I texted back quickly before starting the car. Me, wouldn't miss it. When I went to bed that night, after spending 8 blissful hours at the office doing actual work and not dealing with Monica's drama, she had moved into the guest room. I could hear her through the wall, probably crying again or calling her friends to complain about what a terrible husband I was. I didn't care. I slept like a baby. Monday morning arrived with all the enthusiasm of a dental appointment, and I woke up to the smell of pancakes wafting through the house like some kind of olfactory peace offering. Now, Monica hadn't made breakfast in approximately 3 years. Not since that one time she tried to impress her mother and nearly set the kitchen on fire trying to poach eggs. So the fact that she was suddenly channeling her inner Martha Stewart was about as subtle as a billboard that read, I screwed up, and now I'm trying to fix it with carbs. I shuffled into the kitchen to find her standing at the stove wearing an apron I didn't even know we owned, flipping pancakes with the kind of focused determination usually reserved for people defusing bombs. The table was set, actually set, with matching plates and everything, and there was orange juice in actual glasses instead of the plastic cups we normally used. She'd even put out butter in a little ceramic dish and real maple syrup instead of the cheap stuff we bought in bulk from Costco. The whole scene looked like a stock photo titled, Happy Suburban Breakfast, except for the underlying tension that you could have cut with a knife. Good morning, she said with the kind of forced cheerfulness that belongs in a toothpaste commercial. I made your favorite, blueberry pancakes. I stood in the doorway, taking in the scene, trying to figure out what play she was running. This was classic Monica. When words failed, she pivoted to gestures, as if a stack of pancakes could somehow erase the fact that she'd publicly announced our marriage was open less than 72 hours ago. Thanks, I said, sitting down at the table like a polite hostage who knows that cooperating sometimes gets you released faster. She served me a stack of pancakes that were actually pretty decent looking, golden brown, fluffy, the blueberries distributed evenly like she'd actually followed a recipe instead of just winging it. She sat down across from me with her own plate and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, watching me take the first bite like she was waiting for me to declare her the winner of some cooking competition she'd entered without my knowledge. These are good, I said, because they were, and because I was raised to have manners even when dealing with people who'd recently tried to humiliate me in front of 25 witnesses. I'm glad you like them, she said, and then launched into this whole monologue about her day plans. Errands she needed to run, a showing she had scheduled for a client, something about needing to pick up dry cleaning. Like we were just a normal couple having a normal Monday morning conversation and not two people currently living in the emotional aftermath of a social nuclear explosion. I ate my pancakes quietly, nodded when appropriate, and thanked her for breakfast before heading upstairs to get ready for work. The whole thing felt surreal, like we were actors in a play who'd both decided to pretend the last scene never happened. But I wasn't buying what she was selling, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let pancakes, even really good pancakes, erase the fact that she'd tried to publicly humiliate me, and it had backfired spectacularly. Work was its own special kind of hell that day. I work in project management for a tech company, which basically means I spend 8 hours a day in meetings explaining to people why their timelines are unrealistic and their budgets are imaginary. It's soul-crushing in the way that most corporate jobs are, but it pays well and the health insurance is decent. So I show up and pretend to care about quarterly projections and synergy and all the other buzzwords that executives love to throw around like confetti. My phone started buzzing around 10 in the morning. Monica. I declined the call and went back to my spreadsheet. It buzzed again 5 minutes later. Then again 10 minutes after that. By lunchtime, she'd called me 8 times, sent 12 texts, and left 3 voicemails. I ignored all of them with the kind of petty satisfaction that probably wasn't healthy, but felt absolutely amazing. The text started out apologetic. Can we please talk? Then graduated to frustrated. Why are you ignoring me? And finally landed on angry. This is ridiculous, Julian. Call me back. I watched the evolution of her emotional state play out in real time on my phone screen between budget meetings and didn't respond to a single one. It was liberating, honestly. For 7 years, I'd been trained to respond immediately to her calls and texts, to drop whatever I was doing and attend to whatever crisis or complaint or random thought she needed to share. But that version of Julian was gone, replaced by someone who could look at his buzzing phone and think, not my problem, without feeling guilty about it. Kel texted me around 2. Dude, Monica just called Denise asking if you were okay. What's going on? I texted back, I'm great. Just ignoring my wife. Living my best life. Cal sent back 3 laughing emojis and a thumbs up. When I finally got home around 6, I'd stayed an extra hour at the office just to prove a point. Monica was waiting for me in the living room like a tiger who'd been pacing in a cage all day. She practically launched herself off the couch when I walked in. You're being immature, she shouted before I'd even gotten my shoes off. I set down my briefcase very carefully and looked at her with the kind of calm that I knew would make her absolutely crazy. I prefer the term strategically unbothered, I said. Has a nicer ring to it, don't you think? Her face went through this interesting color progression, pink to red to purple, like she was a mood ring stuck on angry. I called you 8 times. 8. And you didn't answer once. I was at work. You know, that place where I go to earn money, so we can afford this house and your expensive taste in wine. I was busy, doing my job. Revolutionary concept, I know. Don't patronize me. Then don't call me 8 times when you know I'm working. There's this amazing invention called self-control. You should look into it. She started pacing, her arms crossed tight across her chest like she was physically holding herself together. We need to talk about what happened. We need to figure this out. We can't just keep avoiding. I'm not avoiding anything, I interrupted. You announced we have an open relationship. I accepted those terms. What exactly is there to figure out? You set the parameters, I'm living within them. This is what you wanted, right? Freedom? Exploration? The ability to do whatever you want without consequences. She stopped pacing and stared at me like I'd just spoken in ancient Greek. I'm going out Friday night, she said, like it was a threat or a test or some kind of challenge. I shrugged and headed toward the kitchen to see what we had for dinner. Have fun. She followed me, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor in that staccato rhythm that meant she was gearing up for round 2. Did you hear me? I said I'm going out Friday night. I heard you. I said have fun. Which part of that sentence is confusing? She froze, and I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out why I wasn't reacting the way she wanted. You don't even care? I opened the fridge, saw we had leftover Chinese food from last week that definitely needed to be thrown out, and made a mental note to order pizza later. Monica, you announced an open relationship. I'm just following the syllabus. You go out Friday, I'll probably order pizza and watch a movie. Maybe that new action thing with the car chases. Sounds like a perfect Friday night to me. But you don't care that I'm going out. Should I? You're a grown woman. You can do whatever you want. That's the whole point of being open, right? Freedom and independence and all that modern relationship stuff you've been reading about. I could see her brain short-circuiting, trying to process the fact that her grand gesture of rebellion wasn't having the desired effect. She wanted me to fight, to beg her not to go, to prove that I still cared enough to be jealous. But that ship had sailed, probably sometime around the moment she climbed on that chair at my birthday party. Friday came faster than I expected, probably because I spent most of the week actively avoiding Monica and burying myself in work. She spent the days leading up to it dropping hints about her plans. She was meeting friends. She'd be out late. She was getting her hair done Thursday afternoon. Each hint was clearly designed to provoke some kind of reaction from me, but I just nodded and went back to whatever I was doing like she was discussing the weather. Friday evening, she emerged from our bedroom looking like she was auditioning for a perfume commercial. She'd gone all out. The black dress that probably cost more than my laptop, heels that added 3 inches to her height, makeup that could have been professionally done, hairstyled in those beachy waves that somehow require 2 hours and 17 products to achieve. She lingered in the living room, doing that thing where she pretended to look for her keys while actually waiting for me to notice her and comment. "You look nice," I said from the couch, not looking up from my phone. "That's it. That's all you have to say. Would you prefer I wrote a sonnet? I'm a little rusty on my Shakespeare, but I can give it a shot." She grabbed her purse with more force than necessary. "I'll be home late. Don't wait up." "Wasn't planning on it. Drive safe." She left in a cloud of expensive perfume and righteous indignation, slamming the door just hard enough to make her point. I waited until I heard her car pull out of the driveway. Then I ordered a large pizza, half pepperoni, half mushroom, because I'm a man of sophisticated tastes, and queued up that action movie I'd been wanting to watch. The one with Keanu Reeves shooting people in increasingly creative ways. Perfect Friday night entertainment. The pizza arrived in 30 minutes, hot and greasy and absolutely perfect. I cracked open a beer, settled into the couch, and lost myself in explosions and car chases and dialogue so bad it wrapped back around to being good. Somewhere around the halfway point, I fell asleep, the pizza box open on the coffee table and the TV still playing. I woke up around 2 in the morning to the sound of the front door opening. Monica came stumbling in, and even from the couch I could tell she'd been crying. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was a mess, and she looked like someone who'd expected a fairy tale ending and got a reality check instead. She saw me on the couch and stopped. "You're still up." "Just woke up. Movie was boring." She stood there swaying slightly in her expensive heels, and I could see her trying to figure out what to say, how to play this moment. "I had a terrible night," she finally said, her voice small and broken. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered standing by that snack table holding a warm beer while she announced our private business to the entire neighborhood, and the sympathy evaporated like morning fog. "Sorry to hear that," I said, standing up and stretching. "I'm going to bed. There's leftover pizza if you're hungry." I walked past her, leaving her standing in the entryway with her ruined makeup and her ruined night, and I didn't look back. Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect weather that makes you think maybe the universe is trying to tell you something. Clear skies, temperature in the low 70s, just enough breeze to keep things comfortable without messing up your hair. I stood in front of my closet staring at my pathetic collection of shirts like I was picking out armor for battle, which in a way I guess I was. Monica had made it very clear over the years which clothes she approved of and which ones made me look, according to her expert fashion opinion, like a middle-aged dad trying too hard, or someone who shops exclusively at gas stations. My hand landed on the blue button-down that she absolutely despised. The one she'd told me made me look too confident and like you're trying to prove something, which at the time I'd thought was a weird complaint, but now made perfect sense. God forbid her husband look confident. That might give him ideas above his station. I pulled it on, checked myself in the mirror, and had to admit, I looked pretty damn good. The shirt fit well, brought out my eyes, and yeah, maybe I did look confident. Confident looked good on me. I should have worn this shirt more often instead of letting it collect dust in the back of my closet like some kind of banned substance. I paired it with jeans, the dark ones without any holes or weird distressing, because I'm 35 not 22, and my decent shoes, the leather ones I usually save for work presentations and funerals. A quick check of my hair, a spritz of cologne that I'd bought myself last month after Monica told me my old one smelled too aggressive, and I was ready. I looked like a functional adult human who had his shit together, which was either the truth or the world's most convincing lie. Either way, I'd take it. The drive to Sabrina's apartment took about 20 minutes through the kind of suburban sprawl that all looks the same. Shopping centers, chain restaurants, housing developments with names like Willow Creek Estates, even though there were no willows and definitely no creek. She lived in one of those modern apartment complexes that tried really hard to look upscale with their fake stone facades and dramatic lighting. The kind of place that charged an extra $200 a month for what they called luxury amenities, which basically meant there was a gym nobody used and a pool that was always slightly too cold. I texted her when I pulled into the parking lot, "Here," and she responded immediately with "Be right down," which I appreciated because it meant I didn't have to navigate the weird social dynamics of whether to go up to her apartment or wait in the car like some kind of rideshare driver. About 2 minutes later, she emerged from the main entrance, and I'm not gonna lie, I had to do a double take. Sabrina had always been attractive. You'd have to be blind not to notice. But Monica's best friend had always existed in this sort of off-limits mental category, like a museum painting you could look at, but never touch. Tonight, though, seeing her walk toward my car in dark jeans and a green top that somehow looked both casual and elegant at the same time, her hair down and natural instead of styled within an inch of its life, I realized I'd never actually looked at her before. Not really. She was effortlessly stunning in a way that didn't require 3 hours of preparation and a small pharmacy's worth of products. Just her. No armor, no performance, no filter. It was refreshing as hell. She slid into the passenger seat with a smile that could probably convince people to make poor financial decisions. "Right on time," she said, clicking her seatbelt. "I'm impressed." "I've been on time since 1989, I said, backing out of the parking space with what I hoped looked like confidence and not the mild panic of a man who hadn't been on anything resembling a date in about 8 years. It's literally my only good habit. Everything else about me is a disaster, but I'll be damned if I'm late. She laughed. A real laugh, not the polite twitter that people do when they're trying to be nice. And I felt something in my chest unclench that I hadn't even realized was tight. "Where are we going?" she asked. "That Italian place downtown. Giovanni's. You been there?" "Once, like 2 years ago. It was good." Monica hated it because they didn't have the wine she wanted. But that's Monica for you. If it's not exactly what she pictured, it's garbage. And just like that, we were off to the races, talking about Monica like she was a character in a TV show we both watched rather than someone who'd been a central figure in both our lives. It felt weird at first, like we were breaking some unspoken rule, but Sabrina had this way of making everything feel normal, like of course we were going to talk about this. Why wouldn't we? The restaurant was busy, but not packed. That perfect sweet spot where you can have a conversation without shouting, but there's enough ambient noise that you don't feel like everyone's listening to your business. The hostess, a college-aged girl with purple streaks in her hair, who looked like she'd rather be literally anywhere else, seated us at a table near the window, and I ordered a beer while Sabrina got some kind of cocktail with a name I couldn't pronounce that involved elderflower and gin. "So," she said once the waitress had disappeared with our drink orders, leaning back in her chair and studying me with those sharp eyes that didn't miss much. "How are you holding up?" And I want the real answer, not the "I'm fine" bullshit people usually give. I considered lying, because that's what you do in polite society. You lie and say everything's great even when your life is actively on fire. But something about Sabrina made me want to tell the truth, maybe because she'd witnessed the initial explosion and lying to her felt pointless. Honestly, I feel like I've been asleep for 7 years and I just woke up. Everything's sharper, clearer. Even the bad stuff doesn't feel as heavy because at least it's real, you know? She nodded like she understood completely. "Monica's been testing you for months," she said, and there was no judgment in her voice, just observation. Pushing boundaries, saying outrageous things, seeing how far she could go before you snapped. I watched it happen. We all did. And nobody thought to mention this to me. Would you have believed us? Or would you have defended her and convinced yourself we were wrong? She had a point. I probably would have done exactly that, because that's what I'd been doing for years, making excuses, explaining away her behavior, convincing myself that this was just how marriage worked and everyone's wife was secretly kind of terrible and you just dealt with it. Our drinks arrived, and I took a long sip of my beer while trying to figure out how to articulate what I was thinking. The crazy thing is, I didn't snap. That's what she wanted. She wanted me to lose my shit, make a scene, prove that I was the irrational one. But I didn't. I just opted out of her game. "You didn't snap," Sabrina agreed, taking a sip of her fancy cocktail and making a face that suggested it was stronger than expected. "You evolved. Big difference. Snapping is emotional and temporary. Evolution is permanent." We ordered food. I got the carbonara because life's too short for boring pasta. She got some kind of seafood linguine that looked way fancier than anything I'd have ordered, and spent the next hour talking about everything and nothing. Work stories, the absurdity of Cal's inability to operate a grill without creating a smoke signal visible from space, her terrible ex-boyfriend who'd once tried to convince her that astrology was more reliable than modern medicine, my boss's obsession with buzzwords that meant absolutely nothing. It was easy. That's what struck me most. How easy it was to talk to her, to laugh with her, to exist in the same space without constantly monitoring my words or worrying that I'd say something that would set off a landmine I didn't know existed. With Monica, every conversation was a minefield. With Sabrina, it was just conversation. Novel concept. By the time dessert rolled around, we split a tiramisu because neither of us wanted a full dessert, but both of us wanted something sweet. I'd almost forgotten that this was supposed to be some kind of revenge date or statement or whatever the hell it had been when I'd asked her out. It had just become two people enjoying each other's company, which was more than I'd done with my actual wife in years. Sabrina leaned forward, her elbows on the table, and fixed me with that direct stare that made it impossible to look away. You know you're going to leave her eventually, right? I laughed, but it came out shakier than I intended. What are you, psychic now? You got a crystal ball hidden in your purse? No, just observant. You've tasted peace now, Julian. You've seen what it feels like to have a conversation that doesn't end in a fight, to spend an evening without walking on eggshells, to just exist without constantly wondering if you're about to get attacked for some imaginary slight. You think you can go back to chaos after this? You think you can go back to her after remembering what normal feels like? I wanted to argue, to say she was wrong, to defend my marriage out of habit if nothing else. But the words wouldn't come, because deep down, deeper than I wanted to admit, I knew she was right. This was the preview of a life I'd forgotten was possible, and going back to Monica after this would be like voluntarily climbing back into a burning building after someone had pulled you to safety. She wasn't always like this, I said, but even to my own ears it sounded weak. Maybe not, but she is now. And you can either spend the next 7 years hoping she'll change back into whoever she used to be, or you can accept that this is who she is and decide if that's what you want for the rest of your life. We split the check, she insisted, even though I'd asked her out, and walked back to my car under streetlights that turned everything slightly orange. The drive back to her apartment was quieter, but it was a comfortable quiet, the kind that doesn't need to be filled with meaningless chatter. Thanks for tonight, she said when I pulled into her parking lot. I had fun. Real fun. Not the fake kind you have to convince yourself you're having. Me too, I said, and meant it completely. She got out, then leaned back in through the open door. Julian, when you finally decide to leave, and you will, don't second-guess yourself. You deserve better than what you've been settling for. She closed the door and walked toward her building, and I sat there for a minute watching her go, thinking about peace and chaos and the difference between the two. She wasn't wrong. She wasn't wrong about any of it. I pulled into our driveway around 10:30, which was practically the middle of the night by suburban standards where everyone's in bed by 9 because they have to wake up at dawn to beat traffic or walk their designer dogs or whatever the hell people do at 6 in the morning. The porch light was on, which wasn't unusual, but so were the living room lights and the kitchen lights and what looked like every single light in the entire house, like Monica was trying to summon me home with some kind of illuminated bat signal. Subtle as a brick through a window, that woman. I sat in the car for a minute after turning off the engine, just preparing myself mentally for whatever fresh hell awaited me inside. My phone had been mercifully quiet all evening. No calls, no texts, no desperate attempts to check in on me or guilt me into coming home early. I'd almost thought maybe she'd decided to be mature about the whole thing, but the light show coming from our house suggested otherwise. Monica didn't do mature. Monica did dramatic, with a side of passive-aggressive and a garnish of manufactured crisis. When I finally dragged myself out of the car and walked up to the front door, I could see her through the window, sitting on the couch with her arms crossed and her leg bouncing in that rapid-fire way that meant she'd been sitting there working herself into a frenzy for however many hours I'd been gone. She was still wearing the clothes from her disastrous Friday night out, different outfit than her going out ensemble, which meant she'd changed at some point, probably trying on 17 different things before settling on casual jeans and a t-shirt that screamed, "I'm approachable and reasonable," even though we both knew that was a lie. I opened the door and was immediately hit with the smell of cleaning products. lemon and bleach, and that fake lavender scent that's supposed to be calming, but actually just makes everything smell like a hospital trying to mask something terrible. She'd stress cleaned. The coffee table was spotless. The throw pillows were arranged with military precision, and I could see vacuum lines in the carpet. When Monica stress cleaned, it meant she was either planning to murder me or she was having a complete psychological breakdown. Sometimes both. "You're home," she said, like she was announcing the arrival of a delayed package she'd been tracking obsessively. "I am," I agreed, setting my keys in the little bowl by the door that we'd gotten as a wedding present from some aunt whose name I couldn't remember. "Did you wait up for me?" "That's sweet." "Unnecessary, but sweet." She stood up with the kind of dramatic flourish that belonged in a soap opera, her arms still crossed tight across her chest like she was physically holding herself together. "We need to talk." "It's 10:30 on a Saturday night. Can it wait until morning? I've had a long day. I'm tired, and I really just want to go to bed and dream about literally anything other than whatever conversation you're about to force on me." "No, it can't wait." She stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the stairs like a very attractive, very angry roadblock. "You had fun with her, didn't you?" I could have lied. Probably should have lied, because honesty was clearly not going to de-escalate this situation. But I was tired of lying, tired of managing her emotions, tired of pretending that everything was fine when it very obviously wasn't. "Of course I had fun with her," I said, moving around her toward the kitchen because I needed water and maybe something stronger. "We had great pasta. Really excellent carbonara. You should try it sometime. The kind that tastes like the chef actually gives a damn about what they're cooking. Also tastes like respect, which was a nice change of pace." That earned me a throw pillow to the chest, one of the decorative ones she'd arranged so carefully, now weaponized and flying through the air with surprising accuracy. It bounced off my sternum and landed on the floor, and I stared at it for a second before looking back at her. "Really? We're throwing things now? That's the level we're at." "You're enjoying this," she shouted, and her voice had that shrill quality that meant we were about to enter full meltdown territory. "You're actually enjoying watching me suffer." I grabbed a glass from the cabinet and filled it with water from the fridge, taking my time, letting her words hang in the air between us. "I'm not enjoying your suffering, Monica. I'm enjoying my freedom. There's a difference, and the fact that you can't see that difference is exactly the problem." She was pacing now, back and forth across the kitchen like a caged animal, her hands gesturing wildly as she tried to articulate whatever tornado of emotions was currently destroying her internal landscape. "Are you in love with her?" she demanded, stopping suddenly and fixing me with those eyes that I used to think were beautiful but now just looked desperate. "Are you in love with Sabrina? Is that what this is about?" I took a long drink of water, letting the question settle. Was I in love with Sabrina? No, not even close. But was tonight the most peace I'd felt in years? Absolutely. And was I about to admit any of that to Monica? Hell no. "No," I said simply. "I'm not in love with her." "Then why?" "But she's easier to talk to than you," I interrupted, because if we were doing honesty, we might as well go all the way. "She doesn't make every conversation feel like I'm navigating a minefield blindfolded. She doesn't announce my personal business to crowds of people. She doesn't spend 3 hours getting ready just to go out and make herself miserable in some pathetic attempt to make me jealous. And most importantly, she didn't stand up at my birthday party and humiliate me in front of everyone we know." Monica's eyes started filling with tears, round 2 of the waterworks, Electric Boogaloo, and I watched her face crumple like a paper bag someone had stomped on. "I can't believe you're being so cruel," she said, her voice breaking in all the practiced places. "After everything we've been through together, after 7 years of marriage, you're just going to throw it all away because I made one mistake." I set down my water glass and leaned against the counter, studying her like she was a puzzle I was trying to solve, except all the pieces were from different boxes and none of them fit together. "This isn't about one night, Monica. This isn't about one mistake or one announcement or one embarrassing moment at a party. This is about 7 years. 7 years of you treating me like I'm your PR assistant whose job is to make you look good. 7 years of you making unilateral decisions and expecting me to just go along with them because, God forbid, I have an opinion or a preference or a shred of autonomy. That's not fair. You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about fair. Fair would be you considering my feelings before you do things. Fair would be you treating me like a partner instead of an accessory. Fair would be you apologizing, genuinely apologizing, not the fake kind where you're really just mad you got caught. For standing up at my birthday party and making an announcement that affected both of us without bothering to consult me first. She was full-on sobbing now, the kind of crying that comes with hiccups and running mascara and those gasping breaths that sound like someone drowning on dry land. She sank down onto one of the kitchen chairs like her legs couldn't support her anymore, her head in her hands, her whole body shaking with the force of her tears. "I'm sorry," she choked out between sobs. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean, I wasn't thinking. I just wanted." "You wanted what? To spice up the party? To make things interesting? To see if you could push me far enough that I'd finally break?" I shook my head, feeling something that might have been sympathy if I had any left to give, but my sympathy tank had been running on empty for months now. "Well, congratulations. You succeeded. I broke. I just didn't break the way you expected." She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes and a face that was somehow still beautiful even covered in tears and snot and misery. "What does that mean? What are you saying?" "I'm saying that you spent so long trying to crack me, trying to find my breaking point, trying to prove that you had power over me, that you didn't notice I was slowly putting myself back together in a completely different configuration. You broke the old Julian, the one who apologized when you were wrong, who made excuses for your behavior, who convinced himself that this was just what marriage looked like. But the new Julian? He's not interested in playing your games anymore. So what? You're just done? You're just giving up on us? On 7 years of marriage?" She stood up again, wiping at her face with the back of her hand, leaving. Mascara streaks across her cheek like war paint applied by someone who'd already lost the battle. "People don't just throw away 7 years, Julian. That's not how this works." "You're right," I said, grabbing my water glass and heading toward the stairs. "People don't throw away 7 years. But they also don't spend 7 years in a relationship where one person gets to do whatever they want while the other person just takes it. So yeah, maybe I am done. Maybe I've been done for a while and just didn't want to admit it. Or maybe I'm exactly as done as you wanted me to be when you stood up on that chair and announced we were open. Hard to say, really." I started up the stairs, my legs suddenly feeling like they weighed about 1,000 pounds each, the exhaustion of the evening hitting me all at once. Behind me, I could hear Monica still crying, still trying to articulate some argument that would change my mind, still operating under the delusion that she could fix this with enough tears or the right combination of words. "I can change," she called up after me, her voice desperate and pleading. "I can be better. I can be the wife you deserve. Just give me another chance." I paused on the landing, my hand on the banister, and thought about all the times I'd heard some variation of that promise over the years. After fights, after her mistakes, after moments where she'd pushed too far and needed to reel me back in before I actually left. And I thought about how many times I'd believed her, how many chances I'd already given, how many times I'd convinced myself that this time would be different. "Good night, Monica," I said without turning around, and continued up to our bedroom. I brushed my teeth, changed into sweatpants and an old t-shirt, and climbed into bed in the master bedroom. Our bed, the one we'd shared for years, but tonight it felt like just mine. I could hear her moving around downstairs, could hear the occasional sob echoing up through the vents, could hear her eventually retreat to the guest room where she'd been sleeping since her disastrous Friday night out. And for the first time in 7 years, I went to bed without apologizing, without trying to fix things, without taking responsibility for someone else's emotional crisis. I just lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, and felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. I felt light, like someone had been piling weights on my chest for years, and I'd gotten so used to them I'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe normally. But now they were gone. Not all of them, but enough that I could take a full breath without feeling like my ribs were cracking. I fell asleep smiling, and I didn't dream about anything at all. Sunday morning hit me like a truck full of clarity and bad decisions wrapped in a bow made of freedom, and I woke up around 8 feeling more rested than I had in months despite the emotional warfare that had gone down in my kitchen approximately 9 hours earlier. The sun was streaming through the bedroom window in that annoyingly cheerful way that made me want to both embrace the new day and also pull the covers over my head and pretend the outside world didn't exist. I chose option 1. Mostly because I had things to do and wallowing wasn't going to get them done. Monica was still asleep in the guest room. I could hear her snoring through the wall, this delicate little sound that she always insisted she didn't make, but absolutely did. And I took advantage of the quiet to shower, get dressed, and make myself a proper breakfast. Not pancakes designed to manipulate me into forgiveness, just scrambled eggs and toast, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I ate standing at the kitchen counter, looking out the window at our boring suburban street with its identical houses and perfectly manicured lawns, and thought about how much of my life I'd spent trying to fit into this picture-perfect box that Monica had designed without asking if I actually wanted to live in it. Around 9:30, I called my boss and left a voicemail saying I had food poisoning and wouldn't be in on Monday. Did I feel slightly guilty lying? Sure. Was I actually going to let that stop me? Absolutely not. Sometimes you have to prioritize your mental health and your future over Brad from accounting's quarterly projections, and this was definitely one of those times. My boss would survive. Brad would survive. The company would continue its slow march toward mediocrity with or without me sitting in conference rooms pretending to care about synergy for 8 hours. Then I Googled divorce lawyers near me and felt my stomach do this weird flip that was part terror and part excitement, like I was standing at the edge of a cliff trying to decide if I had the guts to jump. The first 3 results were these big corporate firms with names like Johnson, Patterson, and Associates that probably cost more per hour than I made in a week. All sleek websites and promises to aggressively protect your interests, which sounded more like a threat than a selling point. The 4th result was a small practice run by someone named Eleanor Hanley, and her website was refreshingly normal. Just a simple page with her credentials, her areas of expertise, and a phone number. No stock photos of angry people pointing at each other across conference tables, no aggressive marketing copy about destroying your ex-spouse. Just straightforward information presented by someone who seemed like they might actually see me as a human being rather than a billable hour. I called before I could talk myself out of it, and a receptionist answered on the second ring with the kind of pleasant but professional voice that suggested she'd answered approximately 10,000 calls exactly like this one. Hanley Law Office, how can I help you? Hi. Yeah, I need to talk to someone about divorce. Is Mrs. Hanley available? She has an opening at 11 if you can make it in today. Otherwise, her next availability is Thursday afternoon. I looked at the clock. It was 9:45. 11 was doable. I'll take 11. Perfect. Can I get your name and phone number? I gave her the information. She confirmed the address. And just like that, I had an appointment to discuss ending my marriage. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life from the outside. Some Netflix drama about a guy who finally grew a backbone and decided to stop settling for misery disguised as commitment. Except it wasn't a Netflix drama. It was my actual life, and I was apparently the protagonist now instead of the supporting character in Monica's one-woman show. The drive to Mrs. Hanley's office took about 20 minutes through Sunday morning traffic, which is to say there was no traffic because everyone was either at church or still sleeping off whatever bad decisions they'd made Saturday night. Her office was in one of those converted houses that had been turned into professional space. A cute little Victorian painted pale blue with a sign out front that read Eleanor Hanley, attorney at law, in simple black letters. No flash, no pretense, just a lawyer doing her job. I already liked her. Inside, the waiting room looked more like someone's living room than a law office. Comfortable chairs, actual artwork on the walls instead of generic corporate prints. A coffee table with real magazines instead of ones from 2015. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with glasses on a chain and a warm smile, checked me in and told me Mrs. Hanley would be with me in just a moment. I sat down and tried not to think about what I was doing, which was impossible because what I was doing was literally the only thing my brain wanted to think about. Mrs. Hanley emerged from her office about 3 minutes later, and she was exactly what I needed her to be. Professional but kind, probably in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a bun and the no-nonsense air of someone who'd seen every variation of human relationship drama and wasn't shocked by any of it anymore. She shook my hand with a firm grip and led me into her office, which continued the comfortable living room aesthetic with a big wooden desk, bookshelves full of actual books, and a window that looked out onto a garden full of flowers that had no business looking that nice in October. So, she said, settling into her chair and pulling out a legal pad that had actual handwritten notes on it instead of a laptop. Tell me what's going on. I told her. All of it. The birthday party announcement, Sabrina, Monica's disastrous Friday night. The dinner that reminded me what peace felt like, the crying and the manipulation and the 7 years of slowly losing myself to someone else's vision of what our life should be. Mrs. Hanley listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally, nodding in places that suggested she'd heard variations of this story about 1,000 times before. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me with the kind of straightforward honesty that I desperately needed. Any kids? No, thank God. Shared assets? House, cars, significant investments. House is in both our names. 2 cars, both paid off. Some savings, couple retirement accounts. Nothing too complicated. And you're sure about this? Because once we start the process, it's going to get messy. She's going to fight it. She's going to try to change your mind. She's going to make promises she probably can't keep. You need to be absolutely certain this is what you want. I thought about Monica standing in our kitchen last night, crying and begging and promising to change. I thought about 7 years of conversations that went nowhere, fights that solved nothing, apologies that never actually addressed the problem. I thought about Sabrina's words, "You've tasted peace now," and realized she was right. I couldn't go back. Not to that. I'm sure, I said. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Mrs. Hanley smiled, the kind of smile that said she believed me and also approved. Then let's get you free, Mr. Ross. Here's what we're going to need. She handed me a list of documents: marriage certificate, financial statements, tax returns, property deeds, and walked me through the process. California was a no-fault state, which meant I didn't have to prove Monica did anything wrong. I just had to prove the marriage was broken. That part would be easy. The marriage had been broken for years. I'd just been too stubborn or scared or comfortable to admit it. By the time I left her office an hour later, I had a folder full of paperwork, a plan of action, and the first glimmer of hope I'd felt in longer than I could remember. This was happening. This was actually happening. I was getting out. I spent the rest of the afternoon gathering documents, pulling our marriage certificate from the filing cabinet, downloading bank statements, making copies of everything Mrs. Hanley had requested. It felt productive, purposeful, like I was finally taking control of my own life instead of just reacting to Monica's chaos. Around 6, I heard her car pull into the driveway. I was sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by paperwork when she walked in carrying bags of Chinese takeout, and the smell hit me immediately: sweet and sour chicken, lo mein, egg rolls, all my favorites. Another peace offering, another attempt to fix things with food instead of actual change. "I brought dinner," she said, her voice careful and measured like she was approaching a wild animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. "Your favorite. I thought maybe we could eat together, talk about things. Really talk, not fight." She looked better than she had last night. Showered, makeup done, wearing clothes that actually matched. She'd pulled herself together, probably spent the day psyching herself up for this conversation, rehearsing what she was going to say to convince me to stay. "I talked to Sabrina today," she continued, setting the bags on the counter and pulling out containers. "She told me I've been awful. She said I've been treating you like garbage and I didn't even realize it. Is that what everyone thinks of me? That I'm just this terrible person?" I grabbed an egg roll from the container she'd opened and took a bite, chewing slowly while I considered my response. "Pretty much," I said finally, because we were past the point of protecting her feelings. "Yeah, that's pretty much what everyone thinks." Her jaw dropped like I'd just told her Santa wasn't real and the Easter Bunny was a lie. "How can you be so cold? How can you just sit there and say that to me?" "I'm not cold, Monica. I'm just done getting burned. There's a difference." I finished the egg roll and wiped my hands on a napkin. And speaking of being done, I filed for divorce. The silence that followed was so complete, so absolute, that I could hear the refrigerator humming and the clock ticking on the wall and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Monica stood frozen by the counter, a container of lo mein in one hand and a pair of chopsticks in the other, her face cycling through expressions so fast I couldn't keep track: shock, disbelief, horror, anger, devastation. "You what?" she whispered. "I filed for divorce." "Well, I met with a lawyer and started the process. The paperwork will be officially filed in the next few days." The container slipped from her hand and hit the counter with a wet thud, noodles spilling out onto the granite like some kind of symbolic representation of our marriage. Messy, overflowing, impossible to clean up neatly. She looked like someone had just unplugged her soul and forgotten to plug it back in. You can't. We're not. You didn't even. She couldn't seem to finish a sentence, her brain apparently short-circuiting from the information overload. I can, we are, and I did. Mrs. Hamley's a great lawyer, by the way. Very professional. You should get one too. The Chinese food sat on the counter getting cold and congealed while Monica cycled through what I can only describe as the 5 stages of manipulation, a twisted version of grief that involved a lot more screaming and significantly less acceptance. Stage 1 was bargaining, which manifested as her pacing around the kitchen, making increasingly desperate offers like some kind of deranged game show host trying to keep a contestant from walking away with the prize money. What if I go to therapy? She said, her voice climbing higher with each word. What if we go to couples counseling? What if I promise to never, ever do anything like that again? What if I get on my knees right now and beg you to reconsider? I was still sitting at the table surrounded by divorce paperwork, eating lo mein straight from the container, because why dirty a plate when my life was already messy enough? Monica, you standing on a chair at my birthday party wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. It was the culmination of months, years, really, of you treating me like I'm some kind of supporting character in your personal drama. Therapy isn't going to fix that. Couples counseling isn't going to magically make you respect me, and you getting on your knees would just be uncomfortable for both of us. Stage 2 was guilt, which kicked in around the time she realized bargaining wasn't working. She collapsed into one of the kitchen chairs and put her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs that I'm about 60% sure were genuine and 40% performance art. How can you do this to me? She wailed. How can you just throw away 7 years like they meant nothing? Don't I deserve better than this? Don't I deserve a husband who fights for our marriage instead of just giving up? I set down my lo mein and looked at her with the kind of calm that probably made me look like a sociopath, but was actually just exhaustion wrapped in indifference. You're right. You do deserve better. You deserve a husband who's willing to put up with your bullshit indefinitely, who'll let you walk all over him and never complain, who'll smile and nod while you publicly humiliate him and then apologize for existing. Unfortunately for you, I'm not that guy anymore, but I'm sure he's out there somewhere. Maybe check under doormat in the personals. Stage 3 was anger, and boy did it arrive with a vengeance. She stood up so fast her chair nearly fell over, her face red and blotchy from crying, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers that made her look like a very attractive, very furious raccoon. You're doing this because of her, aren't you? Because of Sabrina. You're throwing away our marriage for my best friend. That's what this is really about. This has nothing to do with Sabrina and everything to do with you standing on furniture and announcing our private business to the neighborhood. But sure, if it makes you feel better to blame someone else for your problems, go ahead. You've been doing it our entire marriage. Why stop now? She grabbed the nearest object, which happened to be the soy sauce packet from our Chinese food, and threw it at me. It bounced off my shoulder and splattered on the wall behind me, leaving a brown stain that would definitely require painting over. I hate you. She screamed, and I had to give her credit for honesty. That was probably the most genuine thing she'd said to me in months. There it is, I said, standing up and grabbing some paper towels to clean the wall. Finally, some actual truth. Was that so hard? Stage 4 was the nostalgia tour, which started around 9 o'clock after she'd exhausted herself with screaming and crying and had retreated to the living room couch to regroup. I could hear her in there flipping through what sounded like photo albums, and sure enough, when I walked past on my way to get more water, she had our wedding album spread across her lap, tears dripping onto the plastic-covered pages. Remember our wedding? She said, her voice small and broken. Remember how happy we were? Remember our vows? For better or worse, Julian. For better or worse. You promised. I paused in the doorway, looking at her surrounded by photographs of younger versions of ourselves. Me in a tux that was slightly too big, her in a white dress that probably cost more than my first car, both of us smiling like we'd figured out some secret to happiness that nobody else knew. We looked so damn young, so stupid, so convinced that love was enough. I remember, I said. I also remember the worst part turning out to be about 90% of the marriage. Funny how that works. Stage 5 was blame, which honestly should have been stage 1 because that's where Monica always landed eventually. Everything was my fault. I didn't communicate enough. I worked too much. I didn't appreciate her. I didn't make her feel loved. I didn't understand her needs. I didn't try hard enough to make the marriage work. According to Monica's version of events, she was a perfect wife who'd been trying her best for 7 years while I'd been emotionally unavailable and distant, and basically the worst husband in the history of marriage. You never even tried. She shouted at me around 10:30 when I was attempting to retreat to the bedroom for the night. You just gave up. You just quit. You're a quitter, Julian. That's what you are. You're absolutely right, I said, too tired to argue anymore. I quit. I quit trying to be good enough for someone who'll never be satisfied. I quit walking on eggshells in my own house. I quit apologizing for having opinions and preferences and the audacity to exist as a separate human being. I quit accepting crumbs of affection and calling it love. So yeah, I'm a quitter, and I've never been prouder of anything in my entire life. Monday morning came with the kind of brutal clarity that only happens when you've spent the entire night listening to your soon-to-be ex-wife sob in the guest room while you stare at the ceiling wondering how your life got to this point. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and running on approximately 3 hours of sleep, but I also felt lighter than I had in years. Like I'd been carrying a boulder on my back, and someone had finally told me I was allowed to put it down. My phone started buzzing around 8. Texts from friends and co-workers who'd apparently heard through the suburban gossip network that the Ross marriage was officially circling the drain. Most of them were surprisingly supportive, which either meant I had better friends than I thought or Monica had burned more bridges than I realized. Probably both. Kel texted, "Dude, heard you're finally pulling the plug. About damn time. Been watching you die slowly for years. Proud of you, man." My buddy Marcus from work. "Monica just called Jen crying about you leaving her. Jen said to tell you she always knew you were too good for her, and also do you need a place to crash." Even my cousin Todd, who I hadn't talked to in like 2 years, heard about you and Monica. Saw it coming at your wedding TBH. She made you cut the cake with her hand on top of yours like you were a child. Red Flag City. But the most illuminating text came from Cal around noon, after I'd already fielded approximately 17 calls from various concerned parties. So apparently Monica tried to hook up with Trevor from her office like 3 weeks before your birthday party, and he turned her down hard. Denise heard it from Linda, who works with Monica's friend Beth. The whole open relationship thing was apparently her trying to save face after getting rejected. Thought you should know. I read that text about 5 times, letting the information sink in like water into a sponge. Trevor, who Monica had mentioned approximately 700 times over the past few months. Trevor, who was just a co-worker and such a good friend and really understands me. Trevor, who she'd had coffee with and lunches with and late-night work sessions with. Trevor, who'd apparently taken one look at her offer and said thanks, but no thanks. So the birthday party announcement wasn't about exploring new relationship dynamics or breaking free from societal constructs or any of that pseudo-intellectual bullshit she'd been spouting for months. It was about her trying to sleep with Trevor, getting rejected, and then publicly announcing an open relationship so she could pretend she'd wanted it all along. It was damage control. It was spin. It was Monica doing what Monica did best, rewriting the narrative so she came out looking good. I started laughing. Couldn't help it. Just sat there in my car in the work parking lot. I'd come in despite my fake food poisoning because sitting at home with Monica felt like volunteering for psychological torture, laughing like a maniac while people walked past giving me concerned looks. The whole thing was so absurdly, perfectly Monica. She tried to cheat, failed, and then decided to blow up our marriage rather than just admit she'd made a mistake and deal with the consequences like an adult. My phone buzzed again. Sabrina this time. "Sabrina, heard you filed for divorce. Proud of you." She was never ready to lose control of you. Now she's watching you find yours. "Keep going. You're doing great." I texted back. "Just found out about Trevor. The whole thing makes sense now." Sabrina. "Yep." She tried to monkey branch to him, fell flat on her face, and decided to burn the whole tree down rather than admit she slipped. Classic Monica. She needed this wake-up call. You both did. She wasn't wrong. Monica needed to learn that actions have consequences, and you can't just manipulate your way through life expecting everyone to accommodate your narcissism. And I needed to learn that leaving was an option, that I didn't have to stay in a situation that made me miserable just because I'd invested time in it. I went back to work, ignored 3 more calls from Monica, and spent the afternoon in meetings that were boring but blessedly drama-free. When I got home that evening, she was gone, probably at her mother's or Sabrina's, or wherever she went when she needed people to tell her she was right and I was wrong. The house was quiet, peaceful mine. I ordered pizza, again, because apparently that was my coping mechanism now, and watched mindless TV until I fell asleep on the couch. And for the first time in weeks, I slept through the entire night without waking up to the sound of Monica crying or pacing or having some kind of emotional crisis that required my immediate attention. I slept better than I had in 7 years. 2 months felt like 2 years and also 2 minutes simultaneously, which is apparently what happens when you're watching your old life disintegrate while your new one slowly assembles itself from the wreckage. The divorce proceedings moved faster than I expected, mainly because Monica finally realized that crying and manipulation weren't admissible evidence in family court, and her lawyer, some guy named Richard who wore too much cologne and kept calling me chief, kept advising her to just sign the papers and move on with dignity intact. She didn't listen at first, obviously, because Monica had never met a dramatic gesture. She didn't want to make her signature move. There were late-night phone calls where she sobbed about how she'd changed, therapy sessions she'd started attending like they were going to earn her a gold star, promises that she could be the wife I deserved if I'd just give her one more chance. "Maybe I can," she said during our final meeting at Mrs. Hanley's office, her eyes red and puffy from what I assumed was either genuine remorse or really committed acting. "Maybe I can be that person now. The person you needed me to be." I looked at her across that conference table with its fake wood finish and thought about all the versions of Monica I'd seen over 7 years. The charming one, the manipulative one, the victim, the aggressor, the one who promised change, and the one who delivered nothing but more of the same chaos wrapped in different packaging. "Maybe you can," I said, and I meant it. People could change, theoretically, but not for me. Not anymore. The papers were signed. The marriage was over. And honestly, I felt nothing but relief. Cal threw another party exactly 1 year after the birthday bombshell, and I showed up without the weight of a failing marriage crushing my chest. Same house, same mediocre music, same neighbors pretending their lives weren't boring. But this time, I wasn't holding a beer like a life raft. People kept asking where Monica was, probably explaining open relationships to her therapist, I said, and the whole backyard erupted in laughter. Turned out everyone had been waiting for permission to stop pretending our marriage wasn't a dumpster fire. Sabrina was there too, leaning against the patio railing telling stories that had people hanging on every word. We'd stayed friends, good friends, the kind built on mutual respect instead of drama. No romance, just peace. Later that night, driving home through familiar streets that somehow looked different now, I thought about that chair Monica had climbed on, that smirk on her face, that moment she'd tried to humiliate me and accidentally set me free instead. That was the night I stopped being her punchline and became my own man. The party meant to destroy me became the night I reclaimed my life. And I'd do it again, every awkward, glorious, liberating second of it.